To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Shadows of the Past. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the marble floor of the Pierce mansion as Leo McGowan adjusted the fresh orchids in the grand foyer. To anyone watching, he appeared to be nothing more than what he claimed to be, a meticulous butler attending to his duties. But beneath his perfectly pressed uniform lay scars that told a different story, and behind his steady gray eyes lurked memories that could kill. Leo had been working for the Pierce family for 3 years now, ever since he'd walked away from his life as a Kidnapping operative for MOSSAD. The transition from eliminating high-value targets to serving afternoon tea had been jarring, but it offered something his previous life never could: peace. Or so he'd thought. Roman Pierce entered the foyer, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the marble. At 45, Roman commanded respect in the tech industry, having built Pierce Dynamics from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire. But success had painted a target on his back that he was only beginning to understand. "Leo, excellent work with the arrangements," Roman said, loosening his tie after another 14-hour day. "Jennifer's coming home from Colombia tomorrow for spring break. Make sure her room is prepared." "Of course, sir. Miss Jennifer's favorite lilacs are already in place." Leo's Israeli accent had faded over the years, replaced by neutral American tones that revealed nothing of his past. Roman paused, studying his butler. There was something about Leo that had always intrigued him. The way he moved with predatory grace, how his eyes constantly scanned for threats, the barely visible scar on his neck that disappeared beneath his collar. Roman had hired him based on impeccable references, but he suspected there was more to Leo McGowan than met the eye. "You know, Leo, in all this time, you've never mentioned your previous employment. Where did you work before coming to us?" Leo's hands never paused in their arrangement of the flowers, but something shifted in his posture. "Private security, sir. Nothing as refined as this position." It wasn't entirely a lie. Leo's mind drifted to Tel Aviv, 2019, and the operation that had ended his career. The target had been a Hamas financier operating out of Dubai. The intelligence had been solid, the plan flawless. But when Leo had breached the hotel room, he'd found not just the target, but the man's 8-year-old daughter. The girl's terrified eyes had stared at him as her father reached for a gun. Leo had been forced to choose between his mission and an innocent life. He'd chosen the mission. The bullet meant for the financier had passed through him and struck the child. She'd survived, but the image of her blood on the white hotel carpet had shattered something fundamental in Leo's soul. He'd submitted his resignation the next day. "Private security," Roman repeated, nodding slowly. "Well, your attention to detail is impeccable. Jennifer will be thrilled to be home." Jennifer Pierce was Roman's only child, born late in his marriage to his now-deceased wife, Grace. At 21, she possessed her father's sharp intellect and her mother's fierce independence. She was studying international relations at Columbia, with dreams of diplomatic service that both thrilled and terrified her father. As Roman headed upstairs, Leo finished his arrangements and moved to the security office, a small room off the kitchen where he monitored the mansion's extensive camera system. It was here that his training proved most valuable, though Roman believed Leo's vigilance was simply thoroughness. Leo's eyes swept across the dozen monitors, showing every angle of the 50-acre estate. 3 years of watching had taught him the normal patterns: the gardener's arrival at dawn, the mail delivery at 2 p.m., the shift change for the gate security at 6 p.m. Tonight, everything appeared normal. But Leo's instincts, honed by years of operations in hostile territory, detected something off. A black sedan had passed the main gate twice in the last hour, slowing each time. The license plate was too clean, the tinting too dark, and the driver's posture too alert. Leo made a mental note to enhance security protocols for Jennifer's return. What Leo didn't know was that the sedan contained Damon McIntyre, a man whose hatred for Roman Pierce burned with the intensity of a furnace. Damon had once been Roman's business partner in the early days of Pierce Dynamics, contributing crucial code that had made their fortune possible. But when Roman had bought him out for what seemed like generous terms at the time, Damon had signed away rights to technology that would eventually be worth hundreds of millions. Now 43 and bitter, Damon lived in a modest apartment while Roman's wealth grew exponentially. The buyout had been legal, even ethical by business standards, but Damon's resentment had metastasized into something darker. He'd spent the last 2 years planning his revenge, and Jennifer Pierce was the key to everything. Beside Damon sat Mark Fitch, a cold-eyed mercenary who'd been dishonorably discharged from the Army Rangers for excessive violence. Mark's moral compass had been broken long before Damon had hired him, and the promise of $5 million had sealed their partnership. The butler's the only variable, Mark said, studying the mansion through night vision binoculars. Ex-military, maybe special forces. The way he moves, the way he watches, he's not just hired help. One man can't stop what's coming, Damon replied, his voice thick with years of suppressed rage. Roman Pierce destroyed my life. Tomorrow, I'll show him what real loss feels like. As the sedan disappeared into the night, Leo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. His hands moved unconsciously to the encrypted phone hidden in his desk drawer, a final gift from his MOSSAD handler that could summon help from anywhere in the world. He'd sworn never to use it again, but something told him that his peaceful life as a butler was about to end. In his quarters above the garage, Leo opened a hidden compartment behind his wardrobe. Inside lay artifacts of his former life: a Jericho 941 pistol, ceramic body armor, and a set of identification documents that could get him across any border in the world. He'd hoped never to see them again, but 20 years of survival instincts were screaming that war was coming to the Pierce estate. Tomorrow, Jennifer would come home, and Leo would learn that some enemies never forgive, never forget, and never stop hunting. Chapter 2. The Homecoming. Jennifer Pierce's laughter echoed through the mansion as she regaled Leo with stories from Colombia over afternoon tea. She'd grown into a remarkable young woman, brilliant, compassionate, and possessed of a social conscience that sometimes worried her father. Her auburn hair caught the sunlight streaming through the conservatory windows, and her green eyes sparkled with intelligence and warmth. Professor Martinez says I have a real aptitude for conflict resolution, she said, accepting another cucumber sandwich from Leo's silver tray. He thinks I should consider a career with the State Department. Miss Jennifer would excel in any field she chose, Leo replied, though his attention was divided between her conversation and the security monitors discreetly positioned throughout the room. The black sedan had returned twice since dawn, and Leo had spotted at least 3 other vehicles conducting surveillance patterns around the estate's perimeter. Roman entered the conservatory, his face bearing the stressed lines of a man who'd built an empire but couldn't shake the feeling it was all about to crumble. Pierce Dynamics was in the middle of a hostile takeover attempt by Nexus Corporation, and the corporate warfare was taking its toll. Sweetheart, I'm sorry, but I need to fly to Singapore tonight, Roman said, kissing Jennifer's forehead. The Nexus situation has escalated, and our lawyers need me there for the morning meetings. Dad, you just got home yourself. Can't someone else handle it? Not this time, but I'll be back by Thursday, I promise. Leo's tactical mind immediately calculated the implications. Roman's departure would leave Jennifer with minimal protection, just Leo and the 2-man security team that watched the gate. If someone was planning an attack, tonight would be the perfect opportunity. Sir, perhaps Miss Jennifer should accompany you to Singapore, Leo suggested carefully. A change of scenery might be beneficial after finals week. Jennifer laughed. Leo, you're sweet, but I'm perfectly safe here. Besides, I'm meeting Robin Adkins tomorrow. She's driving down from NYU, and we're going to plan our summer volunteer work in Eastern Europe. Roman's phone buzzed with urgent messages from his legal team. Leo's right, though. Maybe you should come with me. Dad, I'm 21 years old. I think I can handle a few days alone in our fortress of a house. The word fortress resonated with Leo. He'd spent months studying the mansion's defenses when he'd first arrived, noting both strengths and vulnerabilities. The estate was impressive but not impregnable. The perimeter was secured by motion sensors and cameras, but the system had blind spots that a determined team could exploit. The panic room in Roman's study was well concealed, but not stocked for extended siege. And the staff quarters were isolated enough that Leo might not hear an attack on the main house until it was too late. After Roman's departure, Leo's unease crystallized into action. He began implementing protocols he'd learned in Gaza and Beirut, checking weapon placements, escape routes, and communication systems. To Jennifer, it appeared he was simply being more thorough than usual in his evening rounds. Meanwhile, 2 miles away in an abandoned warehouse, Damon McIntyre was finalizing his plan with surgical precision. His team had grown beyond Mark Fitch to include Corey Miles, a tech specialist who could hack any security system, and Ramon Graham, whose expertise in demolitions had made him valuable in certain circles where questions weren't asked. Pierce's plane left for Singapore 20 minutes ago, Corey reported, his fingers dancing across multiple keyboards. Flight plan shows a 17-hour journey with one refuel stop. He won't be back until Thursday at the earliest. Perfect, Damon said, studying architectural plans of the Pierce mansion that he'd obtained through channels better left unexplored. Jennifer will be alone except for the butler and the gate guards. We'll take her tomorrow night, after her friend leaves. Mark cleaned his tactical knife with methodical precision. What about the butler? My recon suggests he's more than he appears. Then we'll give him more than he's prepared for, Damon replied coldly. 4 of us, professionally equipped, against one man trying to play hero. The odds are in our favor. What Damon didn't understand was that Leo McGowan had never been just one man. He was a weapon forged in the crucible of Israeli special operations, tempered by years of surviving in places where death was always one mistake away. And Jennifer Pierce had become more than just his employer's daughter. She was the family he'd never had, the innocence he'd dedicated his life to protecting. That evening, as Jennifer video called her father to say goodnight, Leo conducted his final security sweep. He'd disabled 3 exterior cameras and repositioned them to eliminate the blind spots he'd identified. He'd placed motion sensors at strategic choke points and armed himself with weapons he'd hoped never to use again. In the security office, Leo opened his encrypted phone and composed a message to his former handler in Tel Aviv. Hawk requests Overwatch. Package under potential threat. Advise. The response came within minutes. Hawk, your cover is compromised. Nexus Corporation has connections to Iranian intelligence. Suggest immediate extraction of package. Leo stared at the message, pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. Nexus Corporation wasn't just trying to acquire Pierce Dynamics through legal means. They were using Jennifer as leverage. But there was something else, something personal in the way the surveillance teams had operated. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was revenge. As midnight approached, Leo made his decision. He wouldn't run, and he wouldn't call for backup that might arrive too late. Instead, he would do what he'd trained for his entire adult life. He would hunt. Jennifer slept peacefully in her room, unaware that her life had become the center of a storm that had been building for years. In 12 hours, she would learn that the gentle butler who'd served her tea and listened to her dreams was actually one of the most dangerous men alive. And Damon McIntyre would discover that some sleeping dogs bite back with the fury of a lifetime's worth of controlled violence. Chapter 3. The Call. The sun was setting behind the Pierce mansion when Jennifer's scream shattered the evening calm. Leo, who had been monitoring the perimeter from the kitchen, moved like liquid mercury through the corridors, his hand instinctively reaching for the Jericho pistol concealed beneath his jacket. He found Jennifer in the main hall, her face pale as she clutched her phone with trembling hands. The device was still ringing, its sharp tone cutting through the silence like a blade. "Miss Jennifer, what's wrong?" Leo approached carefully, his eyes scanning for immediate threats while his mind processed her terror. Someone's been watching me," she whispered. "They know things, what I wore to class yesterday, where Robin and I had lunch, even my dorm room number. They said they're coming for me tonight." Leo gently took the phone from her hands. The caller ID showed only blocked numbers, but his trained ear had caught something in the background during the brief conversation, the distant sound of construction equipment and highway traffic. Industrial district, probably within 10 miles of their location. Did they make any specific demands? They said to wait for instructions, that my father would pay for what he'd done. Jennifer's voice cracked with fear and confusion. "Leo, what could Dad have done that would make someone want to hurt me?" Before Leo could answer, the mansion's landline rang. This time, Leo answered on the first ring, his voice betraying none of the cold fury building in his chest. "Pierce residence." "Ah, the famous Butler." Damon McIntyre's voice carried 20 years of accumulated bitterness. "You must be Leo. I've heard interesting things about you." "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage," Leo replied, motioning for Jennifer to stay behind him as he moved toward the security office. "Let me introduce myself. Damon McIntyre, former partner of Roman Pierce, current architect of his downfall. Your employer destroyed my life, stole my work, and left me with nothing while he built an empire on my innovations. Leo's mind raced through the implications. This wasn't random. It was personal, which made it infinitely more dangerous. Personal meant unpredictable. Personal meant Damon would take risks that a professional wouldn't. What do you want, Mr. McIntyre? Justice. Roman Pierce will transfer $50 million to my account by midnight, or he'll receive his daughter in a body bag. It's really quite simple. Mr. Pierce is currently in Singapore. I know exactly where he is, Damon interrupted. Just as I know his precious daughter is standing right behind you, wearing a blue Columbia sweatshirt and white jeans. Wave at the camera, Jennifer. Jennifer gasped, instinctively stepping closer to Leo. His eyes swept the room, identifying the security camera that Damon had somehow compromised. The violation was complete. They were being watched in their own home. The $50 million is just the beginning, Damon continued. Roman will also announce the dissolution of Pierce Dynamics and the transfer of all technology patents to me. He has exactly 4 hours to comply, or Jennifer's death will be broadcast live to every news outlet in the country. And if he complies with your demands, then Jennifer lives to see her 22nd birthday. But Roman Pierce will understand what it feels like to lose everything that matters. The line went dead, leaving Leo and Jennifer in a silence that felt like the calm before an artillery barrage. Leo immediately moved to the security office, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he analyzed their compromised systems. Leo, I don't understand any of this, Jennifer said, her voice small and scared. Who is Damon McIntyre? Why does he hate my father so much? Leo continued his analysis while explaining. From what I can gather, Mr. McIntyre was your father's original business partner. There must have been some dispute about ownership or profits. He didn't mention his growing suspicion that this went far deeper than business rivalry. Can't we just call the police? We will, but first we need to secure your safety. These men are professionals, Miss Jennifer. They've been watching us for days. They've compromised our security systems, and they clearly have inside information about your father's business dealings. Leo's assessment of their situation was grimmer than he let on. Damon's team had demonstrated sophisticated surveillance capabilities and detailed knowledge of the Pierce family's routines. This suggested either extensive intelligence gathering or inside help, possibly both. As Leo tried to reach Roman in Singapore, his tactical mind was already formulating contingency plans. The mansion's defenses were compromised, but they still had advantages. Leo knew every inch of the 50-acre estate, including escape routes that weren't on any official blueprint. More importantly, he still had skills that Damon McIntyre couldn't possibly anticipate. When Roman's phone went straight to voicemail, the Singapore meetings had him in dead zones for the next 6 hours. Leo made a decision that would change everything. Miss Jennifer, I need you to listen very carefully. In approximately 2 hours, men are going to come for you. They're dangerous, they're well-equipped, and they believe you're helpless. Are not. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Leo turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. There was no fear there, only the cold calculation of a predator preparing for war. No, Miss Jennifer, you're not helpless, because I'm going to teach them why you never threatened someone under the protection of a former Kaidan operative. Jennifer stared at him in shock. Kaidan? But that's Israeli Special Operations, yes. I retired 3 years ago, but tonight, I'm coming out of retirement. Leo moved to a hidden panel behind the security monitors and began removing items that definitely hadn't come from any Butler training course. Sir, cancel the transfer, Leo said quietly, as if Roman were standing right there. I will have Miss Jennifer home in time for dinner. As Leo armed himself with weapons that had seen service from Gaza to Tehran, Jennifer realized that her gentle, soft-spoken butler was about to become the most dangerous man any of them had ever encountered. In the warehouse across town, Damon McIntyre was about to learn that some secrets are worth killing for, and some men are worth dying to avoid. Chapter 4. Preparations for War. Leo moved through the mansion with the fluid efficiency of someone who had prepared for this moment his entire professional life. Jennifer followed close behind, her initial terror gradually giving way to fascination as she watched her butler transform before her eyes. The first rule of survival: Leo explained as he secured weapons at strategic locations throughout the house, is to control your environment. They think they know this place, but they've only seen what the cameras show them. He led Jennifer to the panic room behind Roman's study, but instead of sealing her inside, he revealed a hidden arsenal that would have impressed a small army. Ceramic body armor, night vision equipment, and enough firepower to hold off a siege. My God, Leo, who were you really? Someone who made peace with killing when it was necessary. He replied simply, strapping on tactical gear that fit like a second skin. And tonight, it's necessary. Leo's preparation was methodical and terrifying in its precision. He disabled the main electrical grid, plunging the mansion into darkness while backup generators maintained power to essential systems. He activated motion sensors that would track any movement within 100 yards of the house. Most importantly, he began the psychological warfare that had made Kidon operatives legendary. Using the compromised security system against Damon's team, Leo began broadcasting carefully crafted images designed to make them question their intelligence. Shadows moving in windows where no one should be, lights appearing in rooms that should be empty, and Jennifer's silhouette visible in multiple locations simultaneously. They'll think you're panicking, moving randomly through the house, Leo explained as he positioned life-size cardboard cutouts near windows. But panic makes people sloppy, and sloppy gets people killed. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, Damon McIntyre was growing increasingly frustrated with what he was seeing on his stolen security feeds. Instead of the terrified girl and helpless butler he'd expected, the mansion had become a maze of confusing signals and contradictory information. Something's wrong, Mark Fitch muttered, studying the feeds with professional suspicion. The butler knows we're watching. He's using our own surveillance against us. Impossible, Damon snapped. He's domestic help, not military. No domestic help moves like that, Mark insisted, pointing at a monitor showing Leo's fluid motion through the corridors. Look at the way he clears corners, how he maintains sight lines. This guy's been in combat. Corey Miles looked up from his computer setup. I'm detecting some kind of electronic warfare. The security system is feeding us real-time data, but some of it doesn't match what the motion sensors are reporting. Either their equipment is malfunctioning or someone's playing games with us. Then we accelerate the timeline, Damon decided. We go in now, before he can prepare any more surprises. As the four-man team loaded their van with enough firepower to assault a fortified position, Leo was putting the finishing touches on his own preparations. He'd spent the last hour turning the Pierce mansion into a killing ground that would channel any attackers exactly where he wanted them. Miss Jennifer, I need you to understand something very important, Leo said as he conducted his final equipment check. These men are going to try to take you alive, which gives us an advantage. But if things go wrong, if they manage to get past me. He handed her a small pistol, a Sig Sauer P238 that she could handle easily. Point, squeeze, keep squeezing until the threat stops moving. Can you do that? Jennifer's hands shook as she took the weapon, but her voice was steady. If it means staying alive, yes. Good. Stay in this room. Keep the door locked, and don't come out until I come for you. No matter what you hear, no matter what they say, you stay hidden. As Leo moved to take position, his encrypted phone buzzed with a message from his former handler. Satellite surveillance shows 4 hostiles approaching your position. Heavy weapons confirmed. Backup is 40 minutes out. 40 minutes might as well have been 40 hours in tactical time. By then, this would be over one way or another. Leo settled into position in the main hall, where he had clear sight lines to all approaches and multiple fallback positions. The mansion's classical architecture, which had once seemed merely elegant, now became a fortress designed by someone who understood that luxury and lethality could coexist. At 11:47 p.m., motion sensors triggered as Damon's team breached the perimeter. Leo watched their approach on the security monitors, analyzing their formation and equipment. They moved like professionals, but they moved like soldiers trained for conventional warfare. They weren't prepared for what they were walking into. In the distance, Leo could hear the low rumble of approaching vehicles. For men who thought they were hunting a helpless girl and her butler were about to discover that they had wandered into the territory of an apex predator. Leo's phone buzzed with one final message. Good hunting, Hawk. Show them why Kidon never forgets. As he switched off the phone and melted into the shadows, Leo McGowan ceased to exist. In his place stood a weapon forged in the crucible of Israeli special operations, and tonight, that weapon was going to war. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 5, The Hunt Begins. The first sign that Damon McIntyre's plan was falling apart came when Ramon Graham stepped on a pressure plate Leo had installed near the garden entrance. The explosion wasn't meant to kill. Leo needed at least one of them alive for questioning. But the blast of smoke and light disoriented the entire team and announced their presence with brutal efficiency. What the hell was that? Damon shouted into his radio as his men scrambled for cover behind ornamental hedges that provided concealment but no real protection. "Claymore mine," Mark Fitch replied grimly, his military training helping him identify the signature. But it was set to disorient, not kill. "Someone's playing with us." From his position in the mansion's bell tower, an architectural feature Roman had insisted on for its old-world charm, Leo observed the chaos through night vision scopes. Damon's team was already fracturing under pressure, their formation breaking down as they tried to process an attack they hadn't anticipated. Leo's first shot took out Corey Miles with a tranquilizer dart to the neck. The tech specialist dropped silently behind a rose bush, alive but unconscious for the next 6 hours. Leo had learned the value of non-lethal takedowns during his MOSSAD years. Dead men couldn't provide intelligence about who had sent them. "Corey's down," Ramon called out, scanning the darkness for muzzle flashes that would never come. Leo had chosen his weapon specifically for its silent operation. "Where's the shot coming from?" Damon demanded, his carefully constructed plan dissolving into chaos as his team found themselves outmatched by a single opponent they couldn't even locate. Leo's second shot missed Mark by inches, the dart shattering against a stone pillar as the former Ranger dove for better cover. Mark was the most dangerous of the group. His military training made him adaptable and unpredictable. He would have to be handled differently. "Movement in the East Wing," Mark reported, his professional composure returning as he fell back on his army training. "Single shooter, elevated position, using non-standard ammunition." But when Mark turned his rifle toward the East Wing, Leo was already gone, moving through passages in the mansion's walls that Roman didn't even know existed. Leo had spent 3 years mapping every hidden space in the building, finding routes that maintenance workers from the 1920s had used but modern blueprints had forgotten. The psychological pressure was as important as the physical attack. Leo had spent 20 years learning that fear was often more effective than bullets. As Damon's team tried to regroup, speakers hidden throughout the garden began playing recordings of their own voices, conversations they'd had in the warehouse, planning Jennifer's kidnapping and Roman's destruction. How is he doing this? Damon's voice cracked with the strain of watching his perfect plan disintegrate. How does he know what we said? The answer was that Leo had been hunting them as long as they'd been watching the mansion. While they'd focused on external surveillance, Leo had used resources from his MOSSAD days to track their movements, tap their communications, and learn everything about their operation. The hunter had become the hunted, and they'd never even realized it. Ramon Graham made the mistake of trying to flank through the conservatory, where Leo had prepared a special welcome. Motion sensors triggered a cascade of planters filled with flashbang charges, not enough to cause serious injury, but more than enough to destroy night vision and hearing for several crucial minutes. As Ramon stumbled blindly through the ruins of Roman's prized orchid collection, Leo appeared behind him like a ghost. A sleeper hold applied with precise pressure dropped the demolitions expert without violence, his unconscious body joining Corey's in Leo's growing collection of neutralized threats. "Two down," Leo whispered into his radio, knowing that Mark would be monitoring all frequencies. "Two to go." "This isn't possible," Damon snarled, his careful composure finally cracking. "He's just one man." "He's not just one man," Mark replied, the respect of one professional for another evident in his voice. "Whoever he is, wherever he trained, he's been doing this a lot longer than we have." What Mark didn't know was that Leo had been preparing for this specific scenario for 3 years. Every night as he'd conducted his security rounds, he'd been planning for the day when someone would threaten the family that had become his own. The Pierce mansion wasn't just his workplace. It was his fortress, and Jennifer wasn't just his employer's daughter. She was the innocence he'd dedicated his life to protecting. As Damon and Mark tried to regroup and figure out how to salvage their mission, Leo was already moving to the next phase of his plan. The tranquilizer darts and non-lethal takedowns had been a courtesy extended to men who might simply be following orders. But now that he understood this was personal, that Damon intended to hurt Jennifer regardless of any ransom payment, the courtesy was rescinded. Leo's encrypted phone buzzed with an update. Backup still 20 minutes out. Local authorities notified but advised to maintain perimeter. This is your operation. 20 minutes was more than enough time for what came next. Leo had learned patience in the deserts of Syria and the mountains of Lebanon. He'd learned precision in the training facilities of Tel Aviv. But most importantly, he learned that sometimes the most effective weapon was simply being willing to go further than your opponent expected. As he prepared for the final phase of his hunt, Leo allowed himself a cold smile. Damon McIntyre had wanted to teach Roman Pierce about loss. Instead, he was about to receive a lesson in why some sleeping dogs should never be awakened. The amateur hour was over. Now the real hunting would begin. Chapter 6: Revelations in Blood. Mark Fitch's military training told him to retreat, regroup, and reassess the situation. But Damon McIntyre's hatred overruled tactical sense, driving them deeper into Leo's carefully prepared killing ground. As they approached the mansion's main entrance, Mark noticed something that made his blood run cold. The unconscious men, where are they? Damon spun around, searching the grounds where Ramon and Corey had fallen. The areas were empty, as if his team members had simply vanished into the night. He moved them, Mark realized. While we were trying to figure out where the shots came from, he collected our people. That means he knows the terrain better than we do, and he's planning something. What they didn't realize was that Leo had positioned the unconscious men in the mansion's wine cellar, where they would awaken to find themselves zip-tied but unharmed. A message that their captor was professional enough to distinguish between killing and neutralizing. "We abort," Mark declared, his survival instincts overriding his contractual obligations. "This isn't what we signed up for." "No." Damon's voice cracked with desperation. "I've waited 20 years for this. Roman Pierce destroyed my life, and I'm going to destroy his." "Look around, Damon. Half our team is down. We're fighting someone who knows every inch of this ground, and we don't even know who the hell he is. This mission is compromised." But Damon was beyond reason, consumed by decades of resentment that had metastasized into something approaching madness. "Then you're fired. I'll finish this myself." Mark studied his employer for a long moment, recognizing the look of a man who'd crossed the line from anger into suicide. "Good luck with that," he said simply, and melted into the darkness toward the perimeter. Professional soldiers knew when to cut their losses. Leo watched Mark's retreat through his night vision scope and made a tactical decision that would have surprised his former MOSSAD handlers. He let the professional go. Mark was a mercenary following orders, not the architect of this attack. The real target was the man consumed by hatred, stumbling through the garden with a rifle he barely knew how to use. Damon McIntyre had no military training, no understanding of tactics, and no concept of what he was walking into. But his hatred gave him a kind of desperate courage that made him dangerous in unpredictable ways. Leo descended from his elevated position and began stalking Damon through the mansion's grounds. This wasn't hunting anymore, it was execution. But first, Leo needed answers about how deep this conspiracy went. "Damon McIntyre," Leo's voice echoed from hidden speakers throughout the garden. "Your men have abandoned you. Your plan has failed. Surrender now, and you'll live to see trial." "Go to hell," Damon screamed, firing wildly at shadows and echoes. "Roman Pierce destroyed my life, stole my work, and left me with nothing." "Tell me about Nexus Corporation," Leo commanded, using the voice modulation techniques he'd learned for psychological operations. "Tell me who really sent you." The question hit Damon like a physical blow. In his hatred-fueled planning, he'd thought his partnership with Nexus was his own secret, a way to fund his revenge while serving their corporate interests. But somehow, this ghost, Butler, knew about connections that were supposed to be buried in offshore accounts and encrypted communications. "I don't know what you're talking about," Damon lied, but his voice betrayed his fear. Leo had spent 20 years learning to read voices, body language, and micro-expressions. Damon's denial told him everything he needed to know about the larger conspiracy. "Nexus Corporation provided funding for your operation," Leo continued, moving closer through the shadows. "They wanted Roman Pierce's technology, and you wanted revenge. A convenient partnership." So what if they did? Damon's desperation was palpable now. Roman deserves everything that's coming to him. Leo emerged from the darkness like an avenging angel, his black tactical gear making him nearly invisible until he was close enough to strike. Damon spun toward the movement, but his civilian reflexes were no match for someone trained to kill in close quarters. The fight was over in seconds. Leo's hand locked around Damon's throat, applying just enough pressure to render him helpless without causing permanent damage. The rifle clattered to the ground as Damon's vision began to blur. "Listen carefully," Leo whispered, his voice carrying 20 years of controlled violence. "Jennifer Pierce is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Anyone who threatens me dies. Do you understand?" Damon managed a weak nod, his eyes wide with the recognition that he was completely at this man's mercy. "Good. Now you're going to tell me everything about Nexus Corporation, your financial arrangements, and who gave you intelligence about the Pierce family schedule." As sirens wailed in the distance, Roman's security company finally responding to the mansion's silent alarms. Leo dragged Damon toward the house, where Jennifer waited in the panic room. The immediate threat was neutralized, but Leo's instincts told him this was only the beginning. Nexus Corporation had made this personal by targeting Jennifer. They'd underestimated both Roman Pierce's resources and his butler's capabilities. But most importantly, they'd awakened something in Leo that he'd tried to keep buried for 3 years. The peaceful Butler was gone forever. In his place stood a weapon of war, and that weapon was about to teach Nexus Corporation why some battles should never be started. Chapter 7. The Real Enemy. The Pierce Mansion study had been transformed into an interrogation room that would have impressed Leo's former MOSSAD instructors. Damon McIntyre sat zip-tied to a chair, his earlier bravado replaced by the hollow-eyed stare of a man who'd finally understood the magnitude of his mistakes. Jennifer sat in the corner, no longer the terrified college student from hours earlier. Watching Leo systematically dismantle Damon's operation had revealed a strength she didn't know she possessed. Her hands no longer shook as she held the pistol Leo had given her. "Start with Nexus Corporation," Leo commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd extracted information from much more dangerous men than Damon McIntyre. "When did they first contact you?" 2 years ago, Damon whispered, his spirit broken by the realization that his perfect revenge had become his own destruction. "They knew about my history with Roman, knew about the buyout. They offered to fund my activities in exchange for Pierce Dynamics technology." Leo's tactical mind processed the implications. Nexus hadn't stumbled upon Damon's grievances. They'd actively sought out someone with reason to hate Roman Pierce. This suggested a level of planning and intelligence gathering that went far beyond corporate espionage. "Who was your contact at Nexus?" "A woman named Joyce Molina. She said she was in business development, but she knew things, classified things about Roman's government contracts." Jennifer looked up sharply. "Dad doesn't have government contracts." Leo's blood ran cold as pieces of a larger puzzle began falling into place. "Yes, he does, Miss Jennifer. Pierce Dynamics has been developing cybersecurity protocols for the Department of Defense. Your father never mentioned it because the contracts are classified." The implications were staggering. Nexus Corporation wasn't just attempting a hostile takeover. They were conducting an intelligence operation against critical American defense infrastructure. And Jennifer had been leveraged not just against Roman, but against national security interests. "Call Roman," Leo instructed Jennifer. "Tell him to land immediately and contact the FBI. This goes far beyond corporate warfare." As Jennifer dialed her father's number, Leo's encrypted phone buzzed with an urgent message from his former handler. "Nexus Corporation confirmed as front for foreign intelligence operation. Assets moving against Pierce Dynamics Singapore office. Suggest immediate protective custody for primary package." Leo stared at the message, his mind racing through tactical scenarios. If foreign agents were moving against Roman in Singapore while others had targeted Jennifer in New York, this was a coordinated operation with international implications. The kind of operation that started wars. "Dad's not answering," Jennifer reported, fear creeping back into her voice. "His phone is going straight to voicemail." Leo's worst fears were confirmed when his phone rang with a call from an unknown international number. The voice that answered was coldly professional and spoke with a slight Eastern European accent. "Mr. McGowan, I believe you have something that belongs to us. I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage, Leo replied, motioning for Jennifer to remain silent. My name is Ivan Gilmore, and I represent certain interests that have invested heavily in acquiring Pierce Dynamics technology. Mr. McIntyre was supposed to provide us with leverage. Instead, he has provided us with complications. Mr. McIntyre is no longer your concern. Perhaps. But Mr. Pierce's current location is very much our concern. Singapore is lovely this time of year, but it can be dangerous for American businessmen who refuse to cooperate. The threat was crystal clear. Roman was in immediate danger, Jennifer was still a target, and Leo was facing an enemy with global reach and professional resources. This had evolved far beyond a kidnapping into an international incident with American defense secrets at stake. What do you want? Leo asked, though he already knew the answer. Complete technology transfer of Pierce Dynamics defense protocols, delivered within 24 hours. In exchange, Mr. Pierce lives, and Miss Pierce remains unharmed. Refuse, and both will learn that we have resources Mr. McIntyre never dreamed of. The line went dead, leaving Leo with a tactical situation that challenged even his extensive training. He was facing an enemy with global reach, superior numbers, and willingness to commit acts of war against American interests. The local threat had been neutralized, but the real war was just beginning. Leo, what's happening? Jennifer's voice was steady, but her eyes showed the strain of watching her simple life collapse into an international crisis. Your father's technology is more valuable than anyone realized, and some very dangerous people want it. Leo began accessing files on his encrypted phone, calling in favors he'd hoped never to use. We need to disappear, Miss Jennifer. Tonight. What about my father? I have people in Singapore who can help him. But right now, you're the key to everything. As long as they can threaten you, they can control him. Leo's phone buzzed with confirmations from assets across 3 continents. His former MOSSAD network was activating, calling in favors and debts accumulated over 20 years of operations. The peaceful Butler was gone forever, replaced by something far more dangerous. As Leo prepared for a war that would span multiple countries and involve resources most people couldn't imagine, he made a promise to himself and to Jennifer. Nexus Corporation had awakened the wrong sleeping dog, and they were about to learn why Kaidan operatives never forgot and never forgave. The real hunt was about to begin, and this time, Leo wasn't just protecting one girl. He was protecting American national security interests. The stakes had just become global, and Leo McGowan was the only thing standing between victory and catastrophe. Chapter 8, Global Warfare. 24 hours later, Leo and Jennifer were moving through Frankfurt International Airport using identities that hadn't existed the day before. Leo's MOSSAD connections had provided documents that would pass any inspection, along with resources that transformed them from hunted refugees into hunting predators. Your father is safe, Leo reported as they boarded a flight to Prague, their next destination in a carefully planned route designed to confuse any surveillance. My people extracted him from Singapore 6 hours ago. He's currently in a safe house in Tel Aviv, working with Israeli and American intelligence to understand the full scope of Nexus Corporation's operation. Jennifer had adapted to their new reality with remarkable resilience, trading her Columbia sweatshirts for tactical clothing and her academic concerns for survival instincts. How big is this really? Bigger than we initially thought. Nexus Corporation is a front for a joint Russian-Iranian intelligence operation. Your father's defense contracts include cybersecurity protocols that protect critical American infrastructure, power grids, water systems, military communications. In the wrong hands, that technology could cripple the United States. Their flight to Prague was the first move in a chess game Leo intended to win. While Ivan Gilmore's people searched for them in obvious locations, Leo was taking the fight to enemy territory using resources accumulated over 20 years of operations. Where are we really going? Jennifer asked as their plane lifted off. To end this, Leo replied simply. Nexus Corporation made this personal when they threatened you. They made it strategic when they targeted your father's technology. Now they're going to learn that some wars should never be started. Their Prague connection led to a private jet fueled and waiting at a military airfield outside the city. Leo's handler from Tel Aviv met them at the terminal, bringing equipment that transformed them from refugees into an operational unit. Hawk, the handler said, using Leo's old code name. This is bigger than one corporation. Our intelligence suggests Nexus is planning something catastrophic using Pierce's technology. We need to move fast. The briefing that followed revealed the true scope of their enemy's ambition. Nexus Corporation had been positioning assets for months, preparing to use Roman's stolen technology to launch coordinated cyber attacks against American infrastructure. The kidnapping attempt on Jennifer had been just one small part of a much larger operation. The good news, the handler continued, is that their operational security is compromised. We know where Ivan Gilmore is, we know his resources, and we know his timeline. The bad news is that he's operating from a facility in Montenegro that's essentially a private military compound. Leo studied the satellite photographs and tactical assessments. The Nexus facility was formidable. 50 armed personnel, sophisticated electronic countermeasures, and geographic advantages that made direct assault nearly impossible. For a conventional military unit, it would be an impossible target. But Leo wasn't conventional military. He was Kidon, the tip of the spear for an organization that had built its reputation on impossible operations. I go in alone, Leo decided. Jennifer stays here with protective details. No, Jennifer said firmly, surprising both men. They made this about me when they threatened my family. I'm not hiding while you risk everything to protect us. Miss Jennifer, this isn't. Leo, you've spent 3 years protecting me because it was your job. Now I'm asking you to let me help because it's my family. Leo studied the young woman who'd grown from terrified college student to determined warrior in the space of 48 hours. There was steel in her eyes that reminded him of the best operatives he'd known. What did you have in mind? Jennifer's plan was both simple and brilliant. While Leo infiltrated the Montenegro facility through conventional means, she would present herself as a willing hostage, someone seeking to trade herself for her father's safety. The psychological pressure of dealing with their primary target voluntarily surrendering would disrupt Nexus security protocols and create opportunities for Leo to strike. It's dangerous, Leo warned. If they realize it's a trap, then you'll kill them all before they can hurt me. Jennifer replied with calm certainty. That's what you do, isn't it? You kill people who threaten your family. The word family resonated with Leo in ways he hadn't expected. Over 3 years, the Pierce family had become more than his employers. They'd become the family he'd never had. Jennifer wasn't just a job anymore. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. Then we do this together, Leo decided. But we do it my way, with my rules and my backup plans. As their jet turned toward Montenegro, Leo began the final preparations for an operation that would either end the Nexus threat forever or result in their deaths. His equipment bag contained weapons that had served him in a dozen countries, documents that would get them past any checkpoint, and communication devices that could summon help from 3 different intelligence agencies. But most importantly, it contained the cold fury of a man who'd found something worth protecting and the tactical genius to make that protection absolute. Ivan Gilmore had wanted to play international espionage. Instead, he was about to face the most dangerous man alive, fighting for the only family he'd ever known. The final hunt was about to begin. Chapter 9, The Reckoning. The Montenegro facility clung to a clifftop overlooking the Adriatic Sea like a concrete cancer, its modernist architecture designed more for intimidation than aesthetics. Leo observed the compound through binoculars from a ridge 2 kilometers away, memorizing patrol patterns and identifying weak points in defenses that looked impressive but weren't designed to stop someone with his training. Jennifer sat beside him, her transformation from protected daughter to operational partner complete. The Kevlar vest under her jacket and the encrypted radio in her ear marked her as someone who'd crossed the line from civilian to combatant. 37 personnel visible, Leo reported into his throat mic, knowing that Israeli intelligence satellites were recording everything for post-operation analysis. Electronic countermeasures suggest they're jamming conventional communications, but they won't stop our equipment. The plan they developed was surgical in its precision. Jennifer would approach the main gate openly, presenting herself as Roman Pierce's daughter, seeking to negotiate her father's safety. While security focused on processing this unexpected development, Leo would infiltrate from the seaside, where the compound's defenses were weakest. Remember, Leo said as they prepared to separate, these people are professionals. but they're not expecting someone to walk into their trap voluntarily. Use that confusion to stay alive until I can reach you. How will I know when you're coming? Leo's smile was cold as winter in Siberia. Trust me, Miss Jennifer. You'll know. As Jennifer walked openly toward the compound's main entrance, Leo was already moving through the darkness toward the cliffs. 20 years of operations had taught him that the most heavily defended approaches were often the safest, because enemies rarely expected anyone to be crazy enough to attempt them. The climb up the sea cliff was technically challenging, but not impossible for someone with Leo's training. More importantly, the sound of waves crashing against rocks covered any noise from his approach. By the time compound sensors detected his presence, he was already inside their defensive perimeter. Ivan Gilmore greeted Jennifer personally in the compound's main hall, his professional courtesy not quite masking the satisfaction of finally holding what he believed was the key to everything. Miss Pierce, how thoughtful of you to save us the trouble of hunting you down. Though I must admit, I'm curious about your motivation. You threatened my family, Jennifer replied simply. I want this to end. Admirable sentiment. Unfortunately, ending this requires your father's cooperation, which has been reluctant. What Ivan didn't know was that Roman Pierce was currently in a Tel Aviv safe house, working with American and Israeli intelligence to develop countermeasures for any stolen technology. The cooperation Ivan sought was an illusion, and the leverage he thought he held was about to become his destruction. Leo's infiltration proceeded with mechanical precision. Security cameras went dark one by one as he moved through the compound's lower levels, each disabled system buying him minutes of invisibility. The guards he encountered were neutralized silently, not killed, because Leo needed operational security, but rendered unconscious with techniques that would keep them down for hours. By the time Ivan's security chief realized they had an intruder, Leo had already reached the compound's communication center. A few carefully placed charges disabled their ability to call for reinforcements or coordinate responses. The psychological warfare began when lights started going out throughout the facility. Emergency power kept essential systems running, but the growing darkness sent a clear message. Someone was systematically dismantling their defenses. Sir, we have a problem, Ivan's security chief reported, his professional composure cracking under the strain of watching his perfect security unravel. Multiple systems are failing, and we can't establish why. Find the problem and fix it, Ivan commanded. But his attention remained focused on Jennifer, who sat calmly in her chair despite the chaos building around them. You brought him with you, Ivan realized, studying Jennifer's composed expression. The butler. He's here. His name is Leo McGowan, Jennifer corrected. And yes, he's here. The next system to fail was climate control, filling the compound with smoke from Leo's carefully placed devices. Not enough to cause harm, but more than enough to reduce visibility and create the kind of confusion that made defensive coordination impossible. Ivan's men were professionals, but they were prepared for conventional assault, not for a ghost who seemed to move through their defenses at will. When the first team sent to investigate the lower levels failed to report back, panic began to set in. How many men did you bring? Ivan demanded, his careful composure finally cracking. Just one, Jennifer replied with calm certainty. But he's all we need. The final phase of Leo's assault began when the compound's power failed completely, plunging everything into darkness except for emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows throughout the facility. In that darkness, Leo became what he'd been trained to be, a weapon that struck without warning and disappeared without trace. Ivan's remaining security personnel found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't stop. Professional soldiers trained for conventional warfare were helpless against someone who'd spent 20 years perfecting the art of individual combat operations. When the lights came back on, Leo's signal that the threat was neutralized. Ivan Gilmore found himself alone with Jennifer in a compound filled with unconscious guards and disabled security systems. The architect of international conspiracy had been reduced to a frightened man facing the consequences of his ambitions. Leo appeared in the doorway like an avenging angel, his tactical gear and weapons marking him as someone who'd brought war to Ivan's doorstep and won. Ivan Gilmore, Leo said simply. You made this personal when you threatened Jennifer Pierce. You made it strategic when you targeted American defense technology. Now you're going to learn why some sleeping dogs should never be awakened. The operation that followed was swift and comprehensive. Ivan's intelligence networks were rolled up by coordinated strikes across 3 continents. Nexus Corporation's assets were seized by American and Israeli authorities. The technology they'd sought to steal was secured behind defenses that made their original attempts look amateur. But most importantly, the Pierce family was safe. Roman returned to New York to find his company stronger than ever, his daughter alive and unharmed, and his butler revealed as the guardian angel who'd protected them from threats they'd never imagined. Leo McGowan had emerged from retirement to face the greatest challenge of his career. He'd won not just a tactical victory, but a strategic triumph that protected American interests and demonstrated the price of threatening those under his protection. As Jennifer returned to Columbia University, now with discreet but professional security that her father had finally agreed to accept, Leo resumed his duties as the Pierce family butler. But everyone understood that the quiet man serving afternoon tea was actually one of the most dangerous individuals alive, and the Pierce family was under the protection of someone who would never let them be threatened again. Damon McIntyre served his sentence in federal prison, a broken man who'd learned too late that some revenge wasn't worth the price. Ivan Gilmore faced international war crimes tribunals for his role in the conspiracy against American infrastructure. And Leo McGowan returned to arranging flowers and serving tea, secure in the knowledge that his peaceful retirement was protected by the reputation he'd earned in Montenegro, the reputation of a man who'd faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. The sleeping dog had awakened, reminded the world why some people should never be threatened, and then returned to peaceful slumber. But now everyone knew what lay beneath the butler's calm exterior, and the Pierce family slept soundly knowing they were protected by someone who would never let them be harmed. The butler's vengeance was complete, and justice had been served. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see